word on the street is that a lot of students applying to competitive colleges seem to be applying to a ridiculous number of colleges. Why are they doing that? My name is Brooke. I've been coaching students through the college admissions process for over a decade and a half. I work primarily with students applying to top 20 universities. I would say probably 80% of the students that I work with are applying to at least one of those. And I'm going to share with you 3 reasons that I see why this is on the rise. The Common Application has stated that in the 2023 season, the number of colleges that students applied to went up by 10%. Now, reality check for you, not everyone is applying to a top 20 school. And the average number of applications among all users of the Common Application is actually only 4.3 colleges per student. There are plenty of colleges that have things like crazy 89% admit rates. And when you're applying to a school with a posh admit rate like that and rolling admissions, you might only need to apply to 1. But when you're applying to super competitive schools with admit rates that might be 10%, 5%, 4%, that's when we start to get into these college lists of 20, 29, 37 campuses. That seems like too many, but let's chat. The first reason that I see so many students applying to a gob of schools is the lottery effect. Because they say, okay, if I've got a 5% chance of getting into Harvard, and a 5% chance of getting into Stanford, and a 5% chance of getting into Princeton, and they add up all of these crazy percentages, right? If I applied to 20 schools with a 5% admit rate, I would have a 64% chance of getting into one of them. It's that kind of math that I think propels people into seeing this as a lottery ticket, and the more lottery tickets I buy, the more chances I have to get in. The truth is, even if Harvard says you've got, say, a 4 or 5% chance of getting into their campus, your application doesn't have a 4 or 5% chance. Your application either probably has a 50% chance or a 20% chance or a 1% chance of getting in. Because different students have different statistics, different activities, different quality of their application as a whole that's going to impact their ability to get in. Which is why when I work with students, a lot of times I chance them at schools and I get all of their stuff together, their activities, and I might say, hey, if you work with me on your essay, I think we'll probably get you to a 20, 30% chance at Harvard if you REA, right? Your probability is vastly different if you're doing REA or ED versus if you're doing regular decision, right? And that varies across different campuses. But there's so many different things that are going into this that your admit rate is never actually 5%. So there might be some misconception to this idea that it's just a lottery. Now, I will say as a consultant, there is some truth to this. If I ever have a student and they say they only want to apply to like 4 schools and their list is like Harvard, Stanford, and Princeton and one other, I'm basically going to say to them, you better be really comfortable going to the University of Alabama, because that's probably where you're going to end up with that list of 4 schools, because it's just too hard to get in. And increasingly, I've seen, whereas probably 10 years ago when I was working as an essay coach and working with students getting into colleges, I saw a lot more students maybe get into, half of the really competitive schools they got into. And in the last several years, sometimes all we get is 1 top 10 school, maybe 2. And these are kids that are going to Harvard and Stanford. They're not getting into Harvard and Stanford and Penn and this. No. Where did you apply early? That's most likely where you're going to get in. And then there is a huge drop off. And maybe you land at Emory or Rice or UC Berkeley or wherever it is. Second is that college admissions at this highest level are not always a meritocracy. And I think some students recognize that. The factor that edges you in could be something that you have no idea if this campus needs you or not. For example, if you play the oboe, every campus needs an oboe player for its orchestra. If they have an orchestra, now maybe not every campus has an orchestra. So campuses without orchestras, you're probably less attractive, right? But if Princeton needs an oboe player and you're an oboe player, they might take you because you're an oboe player. And I'm not kidding. And obviously they have way more qualified students than they have space for. So they're not taking somebody unqualified. It's just that these random factors can be the thumb on the scale. I was tutoring a student from, I think, like South Carolina, and she recognized that being from South Carolina was perhaps a tip on her application, because not very many kids from South Carolina are going to Princeton and Cornell and Duke. Sometimes students have these, what I would call institutional goal tips, and sometimes they're aware of it and sometimes they're not, but because that can be the factor that gets you in or doesn't get you in, I'm not going to be able to tell if they need an oboe player or not. So that means, again, I need to buy more lottery tickets so that my oboe playing maybe can be what gets me in, right? Maybe can be the factor that tips the scale, and I know it's not going to be my scores. Okay, the third reason that I see students applying to more schools than ever is a factor called yield protection. Now, yield is the idea that if I give you an offer of admission, you accept it and say, yes, I'm going to go to your college, right? The higher the percentage of students who say yes, the higher my yield. And that's just what yield is. In order to climb in the rankings, like US News and World Report, which everybody subscribes to, right? Schools are graded on a variety of factors, and one of those factors is yield. Schools want to keep this number super high so that their school looks super attractive and popular. So for example, the University of Chicago's yield rate is like 80% or something like that. How do they do that? Early decision, right? So some schools play games like that, but less competitive schools like Fordham might not have enough early decision candidates to really fill their school with super competitive people. So they might be yield protecting on their regular decision pool. I will say that with yield protection, typically if you are a yield protection rejection, you won't be rejected. You'll be waitlisted. And if you are waitlisted, you can always write a letter because it doesn't cost a school anything to waitlist you, right? Like in terms of street cred on US News and World Report. But not everybody knows that. And it's also freaky when you talk to your friends and you're like, I was rejected at Fordham, and you thought that friend was going to Harvard, right? That's scary. And also, popping off a wait list requires there to be room. If Fordham's yield tends to be really high, they might not have room to get you off the wait list. At some point, it is a game of chance, which there's some truth to that. So there you go. Inevitably, what this means is that one safety is often not enough, unless you have a rolling admission or something like that where you can get it in early and know before the application deadline. And that means that students, most of my students, I'm telling they need to have at least 2 safeties to actually be safe. And you should be prepared to actually attend your safety. Like that is the reality of college admissions right now, especially if you're majoring in computer science. There are a lot of situations in which that's kind of the best that you're going to do because 5% admit rates, test optional, there's just too many fish in the pond and not all of them can hop into the most elite ponds. So there's 3 reasons why I see students applying to a gabillion colleges. Why are you applying to so many colleges? Where are you applying? Let us know in the comments below. We're building a digital SAT course, which is going to have mock SAT exams so you can practice beyond the resources at Khan Academy, because I know a lot of students are running out of material. There's only 4 tests on there, so if you need more material, it's going to be a great resource for that. Plus, there's going to be awesome videos of me explaining things, which will be fun. Keep your eyes out for that on our mailing list. SupertutorTV.com/subscribe is the best place to find out when that drops. We also have a video-based course for the ACT and for the paper SAT right now, and if you buy the paper SAT course, you can automatically be added to the digital once it's available. So definitely check that out at SupertutorTV.com. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. The end.